In 1982, General Motors shut down a factory in Fremont, California. The workers there were considered the worst in the American auto industry. Drugs on the line, fistfights in the parking lot, cars coming off the line with engines installed backwards. Absenteeism so high that on some mornings, the plant couldn't even start production. Supervisors would walk the floor and find entire teams missing. When the cars rolled out, some of them didn't start. Some of them had no brakes. Some of them had to be towed off the lot. GM gave up. They closed it. 2 years later, that same factory reopened, with the same workers, the same union, the same building. Within 12 months, it became the highest quality plant in all of General Motors. Nothing changed except one thing: the management system. This is the story of how Toyota beat General Motors. In 1950, GM was the largest company in the world. It held the title of the world's best-selling automaker for 77 straight years, from 1931 to 2008. At its peak, 1 out of every 2 cars sold in America was a GM car. GM had more employees than the population of many U.S. states. It owned its own steel mills, its own rail lines, and its own towns. In 2009, GM filed for bankruptcy. Today, Toyota is the world's largest automaker. GM is a fraction of what it used to be. Toyota now sells more vehicles in North America than GM sells in the entire United States. Everyone has a theory about why. Some people say it was Japanese culture. Some people say American workers got lazy. Some people say it was the unions. None of these are the real answer. Because there is one factory in the world where we can run the experiment directly. Same country, same workers, same union, same building. Only the management system changed. That factory was called NUMMI. And what happened there tells you everything about why GM lost. First, you need to understand how GM made cars. GM's system came from Henry Ford. The idea was simple: break every job down into the smallest possible task. Put the worker in front of a moving line and let scale do the rest. An engineer in an office designs the car. A manager decides the schedule. The worker's job is to follow instructions and not slow down the line. If something went wrong, you did not stop the line. Stopping the line cost money. So defects moved forward. A car with a bad weld kept moving. A car with a missing bolt kept moving. At the end of the line, an army of workers called rework specialists would try to fix the broken cars. Some cars were so damaged they had to be stripped and rebuilt. Others were just driven straight to a back lot, where they sat for weeks while someone figured out what to do with them. The result was cheap cars at huge scale. In 1962, GM had 50.7% of the American car market, 1 out of every 2. But there was a hidden cost: defects, delays, a parking lot full of broken inventory, and a workforce that learned, day after day, that their job was not to think. Their job was to keep the line moving. A GM assembly worker could spend 20 years in the same spot, tightening the same bolt, and never once be asked what they thought. By the 1970s, this system was collapsing. Quality was getting worse, not better. Japanese imports were taking market share, and the worst GM plant in America was Fremont. Meanwhile, in Japan, Toyota was doing something completely different. After the war, Toyota couldn't afford GM's model. They couldn't build giant factories. They couldn't hold massive inventory. They couldn't throw away defective cars. If a Toyota factory made a bad car, it bankrupted the company. So a Toyota engineer named Taiichi Ohno built a different system. Rule 1: every worker can stop the line. Every single one. If you see a defect, you pull a cord hanging above your station, the line stops, and everyone comes to fix the problem. Not at the end of the line. Right now, at the exact spot. Toyota's assembly line could stop 1,000 times a day, and at the end of the day, it still produced more good cars than a GM line that never stopped once. Rule 2: don't build anything you haven't sold. Don't hold inventory, don't guess. Make exactly what the customer ordered, exactly when they order it. Ohno got the idea in 1956, not from a factory, but from an American supermarket. He watched how a store called Piggly Wiggly only restocked shelves when customers actually took something. No warehouse, no overstock, no guesswork. Shelves refilled themselves only in response to real demand. Ono realized that inventory wasn't an asset. Inventory was evidence that your system was broken. He brought the idea back to Toyota and called it just in time. Rule 3. The worker on the floor knows more about the job than the engineer in the office, so the worker is the one who improves the process. Every day, a little bit. Toyota called this Kaizen. By 1975, this system had a name, the Toyota Production System, and Toyota was starting to eat into GM's market, one car at a time. In 1983, GM and Toyota did something almost nobody expected. They agreed to open a factory together, a 50-50 joint venture. They picked the old Fremont plant, the worst factory in America. And here is the part that matters. Toyota insisted on one condition. They wanted to rehire the same workers, the same union, the same people GM had called the worst workforce in the industry. GM thought this was crazy, but Toyota believed the workers weren't the problem. The system was the problem. So they got on board. Toyota sent hundreds of the Fremont workers to Japan, not to watch, to actually work on the assembly line at Toyota's Takaoka plant for 2 weeks. Live the system, pull the cord, stop the line, suggest improvements, be listened to. At Takaoka, they ate lunch next to Toyota managers in the same cafeteria with the same food. There was no executive parking lot. There was no executive dining room. The plant manager wore the same uniform as everyone else. Then they came back. Within 12 months, the same factory with the same workers went from producing the worst quality cars in GM's entire system to producing the best. Not the best in Fremont, the best in all of General Motors. The workers hadn't changed. The country hadn't changed. The union hadn't changed. Only the system had changed. This experiment ran for 26 years. It is one of the cleanest natural experiments in the history of business. So why did GM still lose? Because GM couldn't copy its own factory. GM tried to take the NUMMI lessons and roll them out across the company. It failed. Their president, Roger Smith, thought the answer was automation. He spent around $90 billion on robots. At one factory in Michigan, the new robots were supposed to replace entire assembly teams. Instead, they ended up spray painting each other and welding car doors shut. At plants that tried to adopt Toyota methods, the rest of the GM organization pushed back. The managers who had gone to Japan got frustrated and left. By the time GM got serious about changing, it was 1993. By 2009, it was bankrupt. Toyota proved inside GM's own factory, with GM's own workers, that the problem was never the workers. It was never the culture. It was never the country. It was the system. And the system starts with one question. Does the person on the factory floor have the power to stop the line? GM could not answer yes, and that is why they lost. If you want more stories about how systems actually decide who wins and who loses, subscribe. This is the Tokyo Desk.